Welcome into the show. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. I am your host, Chase Sr., and coming up on the Niners Report Rundown, San Francisco making a couple of roster moves. Also, we're going to get to the latest Niners injury news, so stay tuned for all of that. We begin with subject matter number one. San Francisco making a couple of roster moves this week, and I'm going to break down what they mean for this football team. We begin with Danny Gray being activated off of IR. Hello again, Danny Gray. It's been a while since we've seen you. In fact, we have not seen the former third-round pick since the preseason. San Francisco opening up the practice window for the 2022 third-round pick. He's been on IR all year with a shoulder injury, so he has not played in a single game here in 2023. And when Kyle Shanahan originally met with the media after Danny Gray went down in the preseason off a return, and that's where he got injured, he thought, and there was a belief initially, that maybe Danny Gray, who had a solid but up and down preseason and training camp, suffered a broken collarbone. There was good news. It was not a broken collarbone. Instead, a sprained SC joint, but that injury has obviously lingered a little bit for Gray, a vertical speedster, to not be a part of this team up until now if he gets elevated up to the active roster. San Francisco now has 3 weeks to do that after opening up his practice window. What does this mean for the Niners offense? What's the one word that comes to mind with Danny Gray? Speed. He's a 4.3, 40-yard dash type of guy. So if he does play and if he's elevated to the Niners active roster, he can give San Francisco something that they have missed this year and in years prior. And that is deep speed, vertical speed at that wide receiver spot. And even if he doesn't catch passes, he's a vertical field stretcher to at least make the defense account for him being on the field. You ask me if I think he's going to be a part of this offense. I don't, because Kyle Shanahan is all about trust in his weapons. And I don't think he has a lot of trust in Danny Gray because he hasn't played. But also, he's just not acclimated with what this team is doing right now. And it looks as though he might be another third-round miss for this organization. And it's been kind of dubious how San Francisco has missed on some third-round selections over the last couple of years. As recent as this year, they took Cam Latu out of Alabama. I like the player at Alabama. I thought the Niners maybe drafted him a little bit too high. He was not going to make this team. He suffered drop after drop in the preseason. And in training camp, in the preseason game against the Raiders, it was a bad performance in which he fumbled the football after actually making the catch. Then he suffered an injury, and basically San Francisco put him on season-ending IR for an injury that doesn't usually keep you out for the rest of the year. So he was so bad that he nearly did not make this team, and they only put him on the practice squad they put him on IR because they took him in the third round. In 2022, San Francisco took Ty Davis-Price, who they just released and then brought back to the practice squad in the third round out of LSU, and then also Danny Gray. In 2021, Trey Sermon, who didn't even last 2 years with this team. He was released in the lead up to the regular season in his sophomore campaign after he didn't play at all his rookie season. Now he's with the Indianapolis Colts and actually played well a couple of weeks ago. And then the infamous Niner legend Jalen Hurd, who had great physical ability but always got injured back, ACL, actually tried to make a return, caught a touchdown pass in the preseason with the New England Patriots, and then he decided to retire. Make sure you join us on Sunday for our Niners Commanders watch party. It's going to be an early one for everybody kicking it with us on the West Coast, which is a lot of you, but we have people watching the show from worldwide. We will be live with an hour pregame show beginning at 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications. Therefore, when we do go live, you will be notified. Niners roster move number 2. Sebastian Joseph-Day, defensive tackle, who the Niners signed earlier this week, was officially signed on Wednesday. 6'4", 310 pounds. He started 14 games with the Los Angeles Chargers this year and was surprisingly released a couple of days before Christmas. A lot of you might be familiar with the player. He was a 6th-round pick in 2016 out of Rutgers by the Los Angeles Rams. He was with that organization from 2018 to 2021, and he played well under former defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, who then became the head coach for the Chargers, and that's why Joseph-Day followed Staley to Los Angeles. He was with the Chargers in 2022, 2023, after he signed a 3-year, $24 million contract. And this is about as good of a signing as you can make this late in the year for a player who has 3 sacks this year, who started 14 games, who might already become the best interior run defender on this Niners roster. His Pro Football Focus numbers, not all that eye-popping this year. The overall grade less than 60, run defense grade of 54, pass rush grade 64, 3 sacks though, 25 pressures. So those 25 pressures pretty good. And keep in mind that when you look at these numbers, the Chargers defense was so bad. And sometimes analytics don't fully tell the story. Sometimes the tape does. This guy is brute force, and he can win with a lot of power moves. I also like his quickness a little bit, and San Francisco needs to get a little bit better against the run. And Sebastian Joseph-Day will help the Niners do that, especially with all of the injuries at defensive tackle. More on that in a second. 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 16 quarterback hits, and 31 tackles on top of all of those pressures. So this is an impact player who the Niners are trying to get up to speed with 2 games left in the regular season. Solid defensive tackle against the pass, against the run, and I think the Niners made this move, and we talked about this earlier this week on the breakdown of the signing when we did that breaking news segment. I think San Francisco, a little bit concerned, and Kyle Shanahan even said this, about the plantar fasciitis in the foot of Arik Armstead, and at the very least, this is insurance if that injury continues to linger for Armstead. He already started practicing with San Francisco on Wednesday. He was hitting the sled. As for whether or not he's going to play on Sunday, we will certainly see. Maybe he gets a couple of plays in there against Washington. Lastly, as far as the roster moves goes, and we'll get to the injury news in a moment, Jeremy McNichols has been released. He was elevated ahead of Ty Davis Price for the last couple of games to the game day roster. He contributed on special teams. The only time we called his name is when he was called for a penalty on special teams against the Baltimore Ravens. He's been a journeyman for a reason. It is interesting, though, that he was ahead of the depth chart, ahead of Ty Davis Price. Now he's getting released, and TDP is still on this team. Again, kind of the same scenario with Danny Gray. It's probably just because he was a 3rd-round pick. Speaking of this game on Sunday against the Commanders, you going commies, or you going with the Niners to get back on track? I like San Francisco in this one. I'm typing my SF. What are you typing? Get those predictions in down in the comment section right now. Coming up next, plenty of Niners injury news to get to. Stay tuned for that. But make sure you sign up with PrizePicks if you're into playing daily fantasy sports, because this is the only app that you should be using for daily fantasy sports. You get a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use the code CLNS. You pick 2 or more players, you choose more or less on their projected stat lines, and you can win real money. Here are my picks for Thursday Night Football. Joe Flacco, what a story, from his couch to airing it out and putting up digits, leading the Browns on a playoff push. More than 199.5 passing yards. Myles Garrett making that run for Defensive Player of the Year. More than 0.75 sacks, and Trevor Siemian more than a half interception. All he has to do, obviously, is throw that one pick. Easy and exciting daily fantasy, prizepicks.com/CLNS. We'll put that link down in the comment section and in the description of this video because we really care about you. As for the latest Niners injury news here, San Francisco is banged up going into the Sunday game, Week 17 against the Commanders. These players not practicing throughout this week. Defensive tackle Arik Armstead, foot and knee. Aaron Banks re-aggravating that toe injury, which caused him to miss a couple of games. Safety Jair Brown, knee sprain, little bit of a concern, and more thoughts on him in a second. Jawan Jennings, still in concussion protocol. That's not good. Jalen Moore in concussion protocol as well. If Trent Williams can't go, you might be without your second string tackle as well. Limited participants. Speaking of Trent Williams, it's a good sign that he's been limited, because this goes to show you he avoided major injury, but he was still limited. Ambry Thomas, knee and hand. Deebo Samuel, neck. I wonder if that happened on that play where he got popped by Marlon Humphrey but barely moved and kept moving downfield. It was a crazy play. One of the highlights of a game that didn't have many highlights. Oren Burks, knee injuries closing in on a return. Ross Dwelly with the ankle, and Javon Hargrave still out with practice, limited participant, I should say, because of that hamstring injury, but has played the last 2 games for San Francisco, or the last game against the Ravens, excuse me. These players practicing in full. It's good news that the Niners open up the practice window for Danny Gray, and now he's a full participant. So he's not limited at all. Also, Elijah Mitchell, knee. That's probably why Jeremy McNichols was also let go. And then quarterback Brock Purdy, left shoulder injury, suffered a stinger in back-to-back weeks. Not his throwing arm, it's his left shoulder. Came down on that. That's why he came out of the game and Sam Darnold came in. And a stinger in back-to-back weeks for the Niners starting quarterback. But the good news is he said that he's going to play against Washington. The Niners, the line. Let's focus in on the betting line here. 13.5-point favorites on the road against the Commanders. For me, I think that's a little bit too big of a number. Why? The Niners are suffering from a lot of injuries at some really critical spots, and this is an early Eastern window where for San Francisco, 10 a.m. start time for the West Coast, 1 p.m. start time in the afternoon on the East Coast. The good news is with all of these injuries here is that Trent Williams avoided a large scare, a major scare with that groin. He said that he wanted to go back in against the Ravens. The medical staff held him out because San Francisco was down by so much. The 49ers, though, are still thin along the offensive line. Jalen Moore concussion, Aaron Banks, and the Niners' offensive line was getting beat up by the Ravens, the team that has the most sacks in the NFL. It was a physical game against Baltimore. We knew it was going to be a physical game against the Ravens because that is literally their identity, and the Niners right now kind of paying the price. As for Jair Brown, I said a little bit earlier, we'd touch on him more at the end of the show. Suffered a knee sprain against the Ravens. That's most likely going to keep him out. Everything that I'm hearing is that Jair Brown is not going to play against the Commanders. Kyle Shanahan even said that there is concern there with that knee sprain. As for what happens without him, because San Francisco is also very thin at safety. Talanoa Hufanga, torn ACL, out for the year. George Odom, biceps, also out for the year. Logan Ryan was the player getting the most snaps at practice on Thursday. The long-term veteran will most likely get the start if Jair Brown cannot play. And then Isaiah Oliver, awful in the slot, hopefully better at that safety spot because he lacks that speed as a cornerback, is also getting some snaps at safety. He is a depth option there as well. If you want to contact me, interact with me, I love getting emails from everybody. I've gotten a lot in recent weeks. Hit me up, chase@chatsports.com. I'm also on X. I'm on Instagram at Chase_Senior. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button right here on the San Francisco 49ers Report so that you can stay in the know and on top of everything that happens with this squad.